get to Tim Walz, who, just when you think no one's sitting at this table, neither she nor the big white blanket, can embarrass themselves any further, he does. She asks him, to her credit, about the carrying the weapons in war, which we know is a lie. He never served in war. He's been stealing valor for quite some time.
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on DEI, and we let them define what woke is. We got ourselves in this mess because we weren't bold enough to stand up and say, you damn right we're proud of these policies. We're going to put them in, and we're going to execute them.
So, wait, you lost because you weren't woke
Greg
enough?
Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly unleash a no-holds-barred roast of Tim Walz so sharp it leaves the Minnesota governor politically disoriented. With Greg's trademark sarcasm and Megyn's laser-precise takedown, they expose the chaos, confusion, and cringeworthy moments behind Walz's leadership. From failed policies to performative press conferences, nothing escapes their brutal scrutiny. This isn't just a critique. It's a full-blown demolition of incompetence wrapped in biting wit. If Walz had plans to recover, this takedown just canceled them.
You said you carried weapons in war, but you've never deployed in a war zone. A campaign official of yours said you misspoke. Did you? Well, I'm proud, incredibly proud of my record. He keeps doing this. Equally proud of my service in the classroom. Did I mention I was a teacher and a coach, an assistant coach? Okay, whatever. But he's more stolen valor. In the classroom, I'm in the classroom. My record speaks for itself. It doesn't, actually. You've put a lot of lies into that record that you've been called out on by service personnel. You must clarify, as your campaign had tried to do, and now you appear to be distancing yourself from that clarification.
Greg Gutfeld was already grinning before he said a word. That usually meant someone was about to get flattened. And this time, the lucky contestant on Greg's game show of mockery and political carnage was none other than Minnesota's governor, Tim Walz, a man so committed to mediocrity he could make beige wallpaper look provocative.
Here's two pieces of this that are really... I speak like they do. People are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves. And I speak especially passionately about, and then he goes on to blame it on the school shootings. I guess he was upset about school shootings, so he lied. But stop saying you speak like we do. I speak like regular people. What kind of bullshit is that?
Greg leaned back like a man preparing for a buffet of political absurdity and reached for his favorite carving knife: sarcasm. Walz wasn't just a political leader, Greg mused. No, he was a full-time bureaucrat, part-time logic dodger, and aspiring master of public confusion. A guy whose idea of strong leadership was to issue a press release, cancel it, then blame the press.
Walz also seemed to doubt the validity of the last election and future ones.
They've released analyses of election data out of Clark County, Nevada, that show some pretty convincing evidence of election tampering. So what can we do to make sure, A, that the midterms actually happen, and B, that they're free of fraud?
Yeah, this one's a core. We saw just recently Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote?
Greg didn't need a crystal ball to predict Tim's next move. All he needed was a basic understanding of how to run away from responsibility while smiling like he was solving world hunger. If political cowardice had a brand ambassador, Walz would be front and center, holding a gift bag.
Outpouring of love for his son and the relationship between a father and son in that moment was overwhelming too. Yes, even among Republicans. But he wants to dodge the responsibility for his lies, and he brings up his son to do it.
The greatest hit kept playing in Greg's head. There was the time Tim tried to explain his economic plan and somehow ended up describing the plot of a low-budget disaster film. Inflation? Not his fault. Job loss? A mystery of the universe. Small businesses closing faster than pop-up Halloween stores in November? Just a coincidence.
Gonna love this. The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramp.
And Tim Walz really did indeed look like the bumbling knucklehead he said he was.
Greg laughed. Watching Walz handle crises was like watching someone juggle chainsaws while blindfolded in a wind tunnel. Except the chainsaws were on fire, and the wind tunnel was his own administration. The guy made chaos look like an art form. If government dysfunction had a Spotify playlist, Walz's speeches would be the top hits. And don't even get Greg started on the lockdown flip-flops. 1 week, it was science. The next week, it was feelings. Then came a new surge, and suddenly Tim was back on camera with that look he always had, the same one you see on someone who just walked into the wrong wedding reception, but decided to give a speech anyway. Greg marveled at the sheer commitment Tim had to saying things without saying anything. Every press conference was an exercise in answering questions no one asked while dodging the ones that mattered. He didn't pivot. He pirouetted with all the grace of a moose on roller skates. And the slogans. Oh, the slogans. Greg swore Walz's campaign speeches were written by a motivational cat calendar. All fluff, no substance. Just inspirational gibberish that sounded profound until you realized you were clapping for a man who just blamed potholes on climate change and grocery prices on vibes.
You're exactly right in the dynamic, and you could tell Walz was unsteady on his feet. Here is part of his very first answer. They kicked off the debate by going to him, and the question was basically as follows: Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, blah, blah, blah. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? And here's Tim Walz.
Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is...
Greg figured if Walz ever wrote a memoir, it would be titled Leadership in Reverse: How to Walk Back Every Decision Without Looking Like You're Running. Each chapter would be a masterclass in public evasion, ending with a heartfelt apology to nobody in particular. But the real comedy, Greg noted, was how Tim Walz kept getting reelected. He chalked it up to Minnesotans being either deeply forgiving or too polite to admit they accidentally voted for a guy whose leadership style resembled that of a substitute teacher who forgot the lesson plan. Greg wasn't alone in this roast session. Enter Megyn Kelly, who joined the rhetorical beatdown with all the grace and precision of a surgeon wielding a verbal scalpel. She didn't just critique Tim, she dissected him. Politically, of course, Megyn had a different tone. Where Greg was the Joker with a flamethrower, Megyn was the prosecutor calmly presenting a case, so airtight it made Tim look like a guilty contestant on a rigged game show. She wasn't here for laughs. She was here to clarify that Governor Walz's resume was less impressive than a napkin doodle written during a panic attack. She started with education because of course she did. Megyn pointed out how Walz, once a teacher himself, managed to preside over one of the most erratic educational landscapes in the country. Schools open. Schools closed. Curriculum in limbo. Parents furious. It was as if his education policy came from a game of darts thrown at a chalkboard full of bad ideas.
I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly. Because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's his confession. Walz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us. He wants to execute more DEI policies, and Trump wants to execute murderous gang members. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen.
I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly, Greg quipped. Because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's a confession. Greg added, Walz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us. He wants to execute more DI policies. Trump wants to execute murderous gang members. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. And when parents dared to ask for clarity, they got lectures instead. Walz treated parental concern like a viral threat. Contain it, downplay it, and blame it on misinformation. Megyn raised an eyebrow and said, "If parental engagement is dangerous, then Tim must believe bedtime stories are acts of rebellion." Then came the riots. Yes, the moment when leadership was needed most, and Tim Walz decided to audition for the role of the Invisible Man. Megyn noted how his idea of crisis management during the chaos in Minneapolis was to stand behind a podium, say something halfway coherent, and then vanish like a magician who never read the instruction manual. She highlighted how the National Guard arrived late, not because they were slow, but because the governor was busy calibrating his political optics. God forbid he act decisively before checking the wind direction on Twitter. Megyn shook her head. In that moment, she said it wasn't just buildings that were burning, it was credibility. Walz has this gift, Megyn added. The ability to position himself as the calm in the storm while quietly being the one who forgot to board up the windows. His passive leadership was so artful, it should be displayed in a museum next to a sign that reads, "Warning, may cause confusion and economic decay." Then she aimed at his COVID record. Not just the restrictions, but the inconsistency, the exemptions, the selective enforcement. Megyn joked, under Walz's guidance, a barbershop was a biohazard, but a crowded political rally was just people exercising democracy. If logic were a currency,
You said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about.
She laid it out clearly. Tim Walz didn't lead, he performed. He issued mandates like a game show host spinning a wheel of fortune, hoping whatever rule it landed on would be popular enough to trend. But leadership isn't trend chasing. It's decision-making. And Tim Walz treated decisions like hot potatoes. Toss them around, blame the heat, and hope someone else catches them. Megyn wasn't done. She tackled the economy, pointing out how small businesses across Minnesota suffered under Walz's selective shutdowns while big-box stores thrived. It was a rigged game, and Walz was the dealer pretending he didn't shuffle the cards. Greg jumped back in to tag-team the roast, now focusing on Walz's obsession with optics. The governor seemed to think that if he smiled wide enough, nobody would notice the trail of broken policies behind him. His social media team worked harder than his actual policy team, Greg claimed. Every tweet was polished, every press photo perfectly cropped, as if Minnesota's problems could be solved with filters and hashtags.
With Walz, it's hard to even bring him up. He has a resting snitch face. You know? I mean, he forfeited his man card during COVID and the riots. And you're right. And also, at that diner, of course, he left early. So don't you find it weird that for a terrified Politico lingers on candidates' fingers and defend Walz's wide eyes as they claim beards are for bad guys?
He joked that Walz probably had a war room where they spent hours debating the right angle for his next announcement, only to forget what the announcement was even about. Performance over policy. Theater over truth. It was leadership by illusion. Greg said, if Walz had been captain of the Titanic, he would have held a press conference about the iceberg's tone. Meanwhile, the ship would sink while he tweeted about hope, unity, and ice diversity. Megyn, with her usual poise, closed in for the final blow. She noted how Tim Walz had mastered the art of accountability without consequence. Trust eroded, yet Walz kept talking, kept spinning, kept performing. Because in the end, Megyn said, Tim Walz isn't a leader. He's a placeholder. A man who fills space, makes noise, and hopes the applause drowns out the damage. A governor who governs with mirrors, smoke, and just enough charisma to confuse the room. And Greg, not one to end quietly, added that as long as Walz kept pretending to lead, they'd keep the spotlight on him. Because comedy doesn't write itself, Greg smirked. But with Tim Walz in office, that might as well.
back. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter.
4 fundamentals and 2 confusing, saying Israel when you meant Iran. Not ideal. May I remind you of Donald Trump's first tweet when she chose him? Thank you. That was just... I mean, he did seem unsteady. And that's the thing, because one of the goals when you get out there, Camille, is to try to project, don't worry, if anything happens at the top, I can do this job. And at no point last night did Tim Walz.
And just like that, the roast continued to sizzle, because with Tim Walz still standing at the helm, the material was far from running out. Greg couldn't resist doubling down. He leaned forward like a cat spotting a slow-moving laser and went straight for Walz's latest brainchild, his climate agenda. Now, environmental stewardship is noble, Greg admitted. But in Walz's hands, it looked more like a Pinterest board than policy. Solar panels slapped on failing school roofs, electric buses that broke down more often than his talking points, and bike lanes stretching through neighborhoods where nobody rides bikes. Greg joked that Walz was trying to turn Minnesota into a Scandinavian utopia, minus the functioning government and working transportation. And then came the cherry on top, the grand idea to reduce emissions by encouraging residents to mow less. Yes, the lawn revolution. Greg laughed so hard, he nearly tipped his chair. Somewhere in a policy bunker, a team of clipboard warriors thought skipping yard work was the new key to saving the planet. Meanwhile, Minnesotans stared at their overgrown lawns, wondering if the weeds were eligible for tax credits.